The mahogany gavel slammed against the judge's bench with a crack like a gunshot. "Counselor," the judge growled, his jowls trembling beneath his robe. "This is a corporate tax hearing, not some back-alley plea deal. Control your client." Every eye in the courtroom swiveled toward the defense table, where a gaunt woman in a faded McDonald's uniform clutched a stack of crumpled receipts. Beside her, a young lawyer, early 20s, hair still stubbornly overgrown despite 3 years of his father's barber threats, didn't flinch. "With respect, Your Honor," Kenji said, sliding a document across the table, "my client is here because the IRS froze her bank account over a $73 discrepancy. The same IRS that approved a $2.1 billion tax credit for the corporation suing her for defamation after she reported wage theft." A murmur rippled through the gallery. In the back row, a silver-haired man in a $4,000 chiton suit dug his nails into the armrest. Kenji had known the moment he walked into the courthouse lobby. The way the security guards stiffened when they saw his briefcase, the same model his father carried, but scuffed at the edges from being hauled onto subway trains and bus benches. The way the other lawyer's eyes flicked to his shoes, Cole Hahn's, a graduation gift he'd nearly returned, before dismissing him as someone's intern. Then he appeared. "Kobayashi and Associates doesn't take pro bono cases," his father said, materializing beside the metal detector as Kenji emptied his pockets. "Especially not ones that antagonize our largest client." Kenji didn't look up. "Good thing I quit Kobayashi and Associates." A muscle twitched beneath his father's left eye. The same tell Kenji had spotted at 12 years old, right before the man backhanded him for suggesting public defenders were real lawyers. The corporate attorney, a Vanderbilt alum with the polished smirk of someone who'd never had to choose between textbooks and meals, leaned over. "Your little stunt might play well with the Occupy crowd, Kenji, but you're burning bridges you can't afford to lose." Kenji turned a page in his legal pad. "Funny, my client said the same thing when her manager stole her tips." At the prosecution table, a paralegal snickered. The attorney's neck flushed an ugly red. "Ms. Delgado," Kenji asked, "how many hours did you work during the pay period in question?" The woman's fingers worried the hem of her shirt. 89. "And your paycheck reflected?" 32. A juror's pen clattered to the floor. The corporate attorney was on his feet. "Objection. This is irrelevant to the tax." Overruled. The judge's eyes narrowed at Kenji. "But tread carefully, counselor." Kenji didn't smile, didn't glance at his father, though he could feel the man's gaze boring into his back like a drill bit. Instead, he lifted a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Exhibit 17. An email from the defendant's CFO stating, and I quote, 'If we classify the kitchen staff as independent contractors, we can dump the payroll taxes on them and blame any discrepancies on their accounting.'" The gallery erupted. His father intercepted him by the water fountain. "You think this is victory? That corporation owns 3 judges on the appellate court. They'll bury your client. And you, in motions until she's homeless." Kenji watched a drop of water tremble at the fountain's spout. "Then I'll file a wrongful prosecution suit. And when they appeal that, I'll take it to the state Supreme Court." For the first time in his life, he saw something flicker in his father's eyes that wasn't fury or disdain. It looked almost like fear. In the men's room, Kenji splashed cold water on his neck. The mirror reflected dark circles under his eyes, the frayed collar of his shirt. Behind him, a stalled door creaked open. "Kid." The court clerk, a grizzled Vietnam vet who'd seen 1,000 lawyers come and go, handed him a folded note. "Judge's chambers. 5 minutes." The note read, "Asterisk, we can dismiss with prejudice, but only if you waive the right to appeal." Asterisk. Kenji crumpled it in his fist. Through the wall, he could hear his client crying. The bailiff was already leading the jury back in when his father grabbed his arm. "Take the deal." Kenji looked at Ms. Delgado, at the jury box where a young woman in a nurse's scrubs had started taking notes. "No." Somewhere in the back of the courtroom, a phone began to ring. The ringing phone cut through the courtroom like a knife. All heads turned toward the sound. A sleek, silver device vibrating against the mahogany bench where the corporate attorneys sat. The lead counsel, a man with a Rolex that cost more than Ms. Delgado's yearly rent, hesitated before snatching it up. His face drained of color as he read the screen. Kenji didn't have time to wonder. The judge's gavel cracked again. "We are in session, counsel. Silence that device, or I'll hold you in contempt." The attorney's mouth opened, then closed. He leaned over to whisper something urgent to his paralegal, who immediately stood and hurried out of the courtroom. Ms. Delgado gripped Kenji's sleeve. "What's happening?" Kenji watched his father's reaction. The older man's jaw was clenched, his fingers tapping an uneven rhythm against his briefcase. He knew something. Kenji turned back to the jury. "Ms. Delgado, you testified that your paychecks routinely came up short. Did you ever report this to management?" She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "3 times. The last time, my manager said if I kept making trouble, he'd report me to immigration." A gasp from the jury box. The nurse in scrubs, juror number 8, froze, her pen hovering over her notepad. The corporate attorney shot to his feet. "Objection. This is blatant emotional manipulation. The witness's immigration status is irrelevant too." "Withdrawn," Kenji said smoothly. He didn't need to press it. The jury had already heard. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Move on, Mr. Kobayashi." Kenji picked up a document. "Let's talk about Exhibit 22. The company's internal audit from last quarter." At the prosecution table, the lead attorney's phone buzzed again. He didn't dare check it. Kenji stepped out of the courtroom, his tie loosened. The moment the door shut behind him, his father was there. "You're making a mistake," the older man hissed. "That corporation owns half the city council. They'll bury you." Kenji met his father's gaze. "Then I'll dig." A door slammed down the hall. The corporate paralegal was sprinting toward his team, a file in hand. The lead attorney ripped it open, scanned the contents, and paled. Kenji's father saw it too. His grip on Kenji's arm tightened. "Whatever they just got, it's bad. For them. Walk away now, and I can still protect you." Kenji pulled free. "I don't need your protection." When the trial resumed, the corporate team was different. Their earlier arrogance had dissolved into hushed, frantic whispers. Kenji stood. "Your Honor, the defense would like to call a new witness." The judge sighed. "Who?" "The CFO of the defendant corporation." Chaos. The lead attorney shot up. "Absolutely not. This is a last minute." Kenji held up a single sheet of paper. "An email chain obtained 30 minutes ago, between the CFO and the head of HR, discussing, in detail, their policy of wage theft and intimidation." The corporate attorney's phone buzzed again. This time he looked. His face went gray. The CFO took the stand, sweating through his $3,000 suit. Kenji didn't smile. "Mr. Langley," Kenji began, "how many employees at this location are classified as independent contractors?" The CFO's eyes darted to his legal team. I don't recall." Kenji slid a document toward him. "According to payroll records you signed, 47. A pause. Then, "And how many of those 47 are actually eligible for that classification under labor law?" The CFO's throat worked. The courtroom held its breath. 0. The jury erupted. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Kenji shielded Ms. Delgado as cameras flashed. "You did it," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Kenji shook his head. "We're not done yet." Across the street, his father stood in the shadow of a skyscraper, watching. His phone rang, the firm's managing partner. He didn't answer. The next morning, Kenji's apartment buzzer rang at 6 a.m. He opened the door to find juror number 8, the nurse, standing there, a manila envelope in hand. "You need to see this," she said. Inside, blueprints, financial records, and a list of names. Every employee who'd ever complained about wage theft. Marked in red. "The real fight begins." Kenji spread the documents across his kitchen table. Ms. Delgado's case had been the tip of the iceberg. And now, the iceberg was cracking. Kenji's fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed out the blueprint on his kitchen table. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, casting jagged shadows across the intricate floor plans of the corporate headquarters. The nurse, Lena, she'd said her name was, stood with her back pressed against his refrigerator, arms crossed tightly over her scrubs. "You understand what you're looking at?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her elbows. Kenji traced a finger along a red line, marking what appeared to be a secondary stairwell, unlabeled on official building schematics. "This isn't just about wage theft anymore, is it?" Lena shook her head. A loose strand of hair fell across her forehead. "That list of names, those aren't just complainers. They're witnesses." The coffee shop meeting. 2 hours later, Kenji sat across from a woman in a faded janitorial uniform, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Maria Rodriguez had worked the night shift at corporate headquarters for 12 years. The 5th floor, she whispered in Spanish, eyes darting to the shop's entrance every few seconds. After midnight, they bring boxes up the service elevator. No labels, just numbers. Kenji slid a notepad toward her. Can you describe them? Maria's fingers left damp prints on the paper as she sketched. Not boxes. Safes. The father's office. Kobayashi Sr.'s office smelled of leather and expensive scotch. He didn't look up from his paperwork when Kenji entered. You're digging your own grave, his father said, finally setting down his pen. The desk between them might as well have been a battlefield. Kenji dropped a copy of Maria's sketch onto the polished wood. Tell me what these are. For the first time in his life, Kenji saw genuine fear in his father's eyes. You need to stop. Now. The break-in. 3:17 a.m. Kenji's breath fogged in the cold air as he picked the lock on the service entrance. The security guard's schedule, obtained by Lena from a friend in building management, gave him 23 minutes before the next patrol. The unmarked stairwell was colder than the rest of the building. His flashlight beam caught particles of dust swirling like ghosts as he ascended. The 5th floor door was heavier than it should have been. Reinforced steel. Keycard access. Kenji pressed his ear to the cold metal. From the other side came a sound that didn't belong in an office building at 3 a.m. A child crying. The discovery. The room was lined with safes, just as Maria described. But it was the crib in the corner that made Kenji's stomach drop. Empty now, but the blankets were still warm. His flashlight caught something on the floor. A tiny shoe. And next to it, a syringe. The chase. Footsteps in the hallway. Kenji barely had time to duck behind a filing cabinet before the door hissed open. 2 men in lab coats wheeled in a cart. On it, a small form under a sheet. Subject 17 is prepped for transport, one said, checking his watch. The buyer lands at 5. Kenji's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Lena. Whatever you found, get out. Now. The escape. The service elevator took forever to descend. Every second, Kenji expected the doors to wrench open, to face whatever those men in lab coats really were. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A photo attachment loaded slowly. His father, sitting across from the corporation's CEO, and between them on the table, a signed contract. Kenji's blood turned to ice. The betrayal. The text came through as the elevator hit ground level. Your father just sold you out. The safe house. Lena's apartment smelled like antiseptic and gun oil. She tossed Kenji a burner phone. You have 2 choices, she said, pulling a pistol from her medical bag. Run. Or fight. Kenji looked at the documents spread across her kitchen table. The schematics. The list of names. The photo of his father. Outside, a car slowed to a stop. Engine idling. Doors opening. The car doors slammed outside Lena's apartment with the finality of coffin lids closing. Kenji's fingers tightened around the burner phone as he watched through the slats of the blinds. 3 figures emerging from a black SUV, their faces obscured by the pre-dawn gloom and the brims of their hats. Their movements were efficient, practiced. Not corporate security. Something worse. Lena moved silently beside him, her breath warm against his ear. Back door. Now. She pressed the pistol into his hand. The metal was shockingly cold. Kenji shook his head. I don't. You will. Her eyes were dark pools in the dim light. If they take you, those children are dead. The knob on the front door jiggled. A quiet, testing motion. Then a pause. They all knew what came next. The apartment's back exit led to a fire escape that groaned under their weight. December wind sliced through Kenji's suit jacket as they descended, the metal stairs trembling with each step. Below them, the alley yawned black and empty, too empty. No stray cats, no dumpster divers. Just fresh tire marks in the frost. Lena's hand on his arm stopped him at the final landing. She pointed to the security camera above the alley's mouth, its red light dark. They cut the feed. A crash came from above, the apartment door giving way. Then a voice, calm and measured. Check the bathroom first. He might be hiding. Kenji knew that voice. Haruto Sato, his father's head of security. The man who'd taught him to ride a bike 20 years ago. Lena tugged him forward. They kept to the shadows, their footsteps silent against the cracked pavement. The alley emptied onto a side street where a taxi idled, its off-duty light glowing. The driver, an older woman with sharp eyes, nodded as they approached. "Where to?" she asked as they slid into the back seat. Kenji opened his mouth, but Lena answered first. Pier 42, the old fish packing plant. As the cab pulled away, Kenji watched the alley in the side mirror. A figure emerged, phone to ear. Even at this distance, he recognized the slope of Sato's shoulders. The way he nodded once before turning back toward the building. The burner phone in Kenji's pocket chose that moment to vibrate. An unknown number. The message contained just 4 words. He knew about Subject 17. The attached photo showed his father standing outside the corporate headquarters service entrance. Dated 2 weeks ago. The timestamp, 3:15 a.m. Kenji's thumb hovered over the screen. Before he could respond, Lena snatched the phone and powered it off. "They're tracking it," she said, cracking the window to toss the SIM card into the night. "Your father's not just covering this up. He's involved." The cab turned onto the waterfront, the smell of salt and rotting fish thick in the air. The packing plant loomed ahead, its broken windows like missing teeth in a gaping mouth. Somewhere in that darkness, answers waited. And something else, something that made Lena's hands shake as she paid the driver. "Last chance to walk away," she murmured as the cab's taillights disappeared around a corner. Kenji thought of the tiny shoe on the 5th floor. The warm blankets. He shook his head. The first gunshot echoed as they reached the loading dock. Not aimed at them. This was sharper, closer. Inside the building, Lena moved like liquid shadow, her pistol drawn. Kenji followed, his borrowed weapon heavy in his untrained hands. The interior smelled of mildew and something metallic. Recent. Human. A trail of blood droplets led to a makeshift office in what had once been the foreman's station. There, slumped against a filing cabinet, a man in a lab coat gasped for air. His ID badge read Dr. Elias Voss. Research and Development. Lena was on him in seconds, applying pressure to the gut wound. "Who shot you?" she demanded. Voss's lips peeled back from blood-stained teeth. "Same people. Who hired you to find me?" His gaze slid to Kenji. "You look just like him. Your father never could keep his." A noise from the shadows. Lena spun, gun raised, but too late. The bullet caught Voss between the eyes. His head snapped back, a fine mist painting the cabinet behind him. Kenji barely registered the second shot, the one that grazed his shoulder, before Lena was dragging him behind cover. Her return fire echoed through the cavernous space. "Change of plan," she hissed, pressing a key into his palm. "Storage locker 114 at the bus terminal. Go." He stared at her. "What about you?" Another shot. Closer this time. Lena's smile was all edges. "I'll buy you time. Run." The last thing Kenji saw as he fled was Lena stepping into the open, both hands steady on her weapon. Then the night erupted in gunfire. The bus terminal was nearly deserted at this hour. Locker 114 contained a backpack stuffed with cash, a passport bearing his photo but not his name, and a single USB drive labeled in careful block letters. "For my son." Kenji's fingers trembled as he plugged it into a library computer. The video that loaded showed his father seated at his office desk, years younger, but no less weary. "If you're seeing this," the recording began, "I'm either dead or complicit. Both, perhaps." A shaky breath. "What they're doing at the 5th floor, it started with stem cells. Then they wanted more. Fresh samples. I tried to stop it, but the money, the power." The video cut to security footage, a young boy being led down a hospital corridor. The timestamp placed it 8 years ago. Kenji's breath caught. He knew that face. It was his own. His father's voice continued, hollow now. "They took you first. Just a blood draw," they said. "Then bone marrow. When I threatened to go public, they showed me what they could do, what they'd already done to others." The footage changed again. A laboratory. Rows of cribs. Tiny arms hooked to IVs. "I'm sorry," his father whispered. "For all of it." The video ended. The USB drive self-erased. Kenji sat in the humming silence of the library, the backpack at his feet. Outside, dawn painted the sky in shades of bruise. Somewhere in the city, children were disappearing. Somewhere, Lena was fighting or dying. Somewhere, his father waited. He shouldered the pack. The first bus of the day was boarding. The bus engine coughed to life as Kenji slumped in the rearmost seat, his injured shoulder throbbing in time with the diesel vibrations. Through grease-smeared windows, he watched the city skyline recede. the corporate towers where his father still worked, the courthouse where he'd fought for Ms. Delgado, all shrinking into insignificance. The backpack sat heavy on his lap, the USB drive's revelations burning through the fabric. 2 rows ahead, a toddler in a stained Mickey Mouse shirt babbled to his exhausted mother. Kenji's fingers twitched toward the burned phone Lena had left in the bag. How old had he been when they took his blood? Had he cried like this child might have separated from his mother? The bus lurched around a corner, throwing Kenji against the window. His reflection stared back, pale, unshaven, eyes shadowed with sleepless horror. The face of a man who'd seen cribs lined up like specimen jars. Next stop, Milford Crossing, the driver announced. Kenji's head snapped up. Milford, the town where his father's summer home stood vacant 11 months of the year, where the family portraits showed a younger Kenji building sandcastles while his father watched from the shaded patio, cell phone glued to his ear. The bus brakes squealed as they approached the sleepy terminal. Kenji was first off, the backpack straps cutting into his good shoulder. Morning sunlight glinted off something metallic in the parking lot, a vintage Bronco with its driver's side window rolled down. The man behind the wheel wore mirrored aviators and a faded Marine's cap. "You look like you could use a lift," the stranger said. His voice was gravel and cigarette smoke. Kenji's hand drifted toward the pistol Lena had given him, still tucked in his waistband. "Who are you?" The man lifted his chin, revealing a scar that ran from ear to collarbone. "Let's call me your father's retirement plan." He tossed a Polaroid onto the passenger's seat. Kenji at age 9, building that sandcastle. "Get in." Your old man left more than a confession in that safe house. The Bronco's interior smelled of gun oil and spearmint. As they pulled onto the highway, the Marine tapped a folded map against the steering wheel. Your dad wasn't just covering up their experiments. He was documenting them. Names, dates, shipping routes. Kenji's throat tightened. Shipping what? Better you don't. The Marine's head jerked toward the rearview mirror. Oh hell, hold on. The Bronco swerved as a black Suburban roared up behind them. Gunfire shattered the back window. Glass rained down as Kenji ducked, the Marine cursing and reaching beneath his seat. "Take the wheel," he barked, producing a sawed-off shotgun. Kenji grabbed the steering wheel as the Marine twisted around, firing through the missing rear window. The Suburban veered sharply, one tire blown, but didn't stop. "Again!" Kenji yelled. The Marine fired twice more. The second shot struck the Suburban's windshield. It swerved violently, clipped a guardrail, and flipped end over end in a shower of sparks. Kenji expected relief. Instead, the Marine stomped on the accelerator. "They'll have more coming." "Look in the glove box." Inside lay a single keycard and a photograph of a cargo ship docked at Pier 9. The vessel's name, Morningstar, had been circled in red. "That's tonight's shipment," the Marine growled. "Last one before they scrubbed the operation." Kenji's stomach turned. How many children? Not children. The Marine downshifted hard as they took an exit-marked industrial zone. Not anymore. The Bronco skidded to a halt behind a derelict warehouse. The Marine was moving before the engine died, hauling a duffel bag from the truck bed. Inside, Kevlar vests, grenades, and a tablet showing live security feeds of Pier 9. "They processed them on board," the Marine said, tapping a feed showing men in hazmat suits loading crates. "Stabilize the specimens for transport." Kenji's vision swam. "You're talking about them like they're cargo. They stopped being kids the moment those needles went in." The Marine shoved a vest at him. "Your father tried to blow the whistle 3 years ago. That's when they took you the second time. Drew enough bone marrow to keep him compliant." The world narrowed to a single, horrifying point. Kenji's hand rose involuntarily to his lower back, to the scar he'd always assumed was from a childhood fall. The Marine's radio crackled to life. "Alpha Team to base. We have eyes on Subject 17. Repeat, Subject 17 is secured for transfer." Kenji's head snapped up. "That's me, isn't it? That's what they called me." The Marine didn't answer. He was too busy priming a grenade. Pier 9 loomed in the distance, its cranes silhouetted against the setting sun. Somewhere in that maze of shipping containers, children who'd been turned into commodities waited. Somewhere, Kenji's father was either fighting this monstrosity or enabling it. The Marine racked his shotgun. "You still got that pistol?" Kenji checked the magazine. "Full." "Good." The Marine tossed him the keycard. "Because we're about to make some noise." The acrid scent of diesel fuel and rusted metal filled Kenji's nostrils as he crouched behind a stack of corroded shipping containers. The Marine, who'd finally grunted the name Hicks when Kenji pressed, moved like a shadow ahead of him, his shotgun barrel sweeping methodically across the dimly lit dockyard. Somewhere beyond the maze of containers, the Morning Star loomed, its massive hull groaning against the pier like a restless beast. Kenji's fingers trembled against the pistol grip. The weight of it still felt foreign, dangerous. He'd spent 3 years in courtrooms arguing over paperwork, and now here he was, tracking human cargo through the bowels of the city's industrial district. The keycard in his pocket seemed to burn against his thigh. Hicks held up a fist, signaling stop. He pointed to a security camera mounted above a reinforced door marked Pier 9. Authorized personnel only. The red light beneath its lens blinked steadily. Active. Card reader. Hicks mouthed, gesturing to the slot beside the door. You first. Kenji swallowed hard. The moment stretched as he inched forward, every nerve screaming that this was a trap. The keycard slipped from his sweaty fingers once before he managed to swipe it. A green light. A soft click. The door opened onto a nightmare. Steel examination tables lined the far wall, each equipped with restraints. For stands clustered in the corner like skeletal sentinels. And the smell, antiseptic undercut, with something coppery and sweet that made Kenji's stomach lurch. But the room stood empty. No children. No hazmat suits. Just a single, blinking monitor atop a rolling cart. Hicks cursed under his breath. They moved up the timetable. Kenji stepped toward the monitor. The screen showed a live feed, a cavernous cargo hold lined with what looked like oversized incubators. Inside each, a small, still form. Wires snaked from their arms to machines that hummed and beeped. At the center of the room, a man in a white coat studied a clipboard. Even through the grainy footage, Kenji recognized Dr. Voss's replacement. The Marine's hand clamped onto Kenji's shoulder. That's the ship's medical bay. They're prepping for departure. A noise from the hallway, footsteps approaching. Hicks shoved Kenji behind a supply cabinet just as the door swung open. 2 guards entered, their conversation casual, oblivious. Think the boss's kid will actually show? One asked, popping gum. The other chuckled. After what happened to the old man. No chance. Kenji's breath caught. His father. Something had happened to his father. Hicks didn't hesitate. He stepped out and fired twice. Both men dropped before they could reach for their weapons. No more stealth, Hicks grunted, tossing Kenji one of the dead men's radios. Move fast. They cleared the hallway in seconds, following signs for docking bay 3. The radio crackled to life, a distorted voice calling for status updates on containment procedures. Kenji's injured shoulder screamed with each step, but the pain barely registered. All he could see were those incubators. Those children. His own face at 9 years old, unaware of the needle marks hidden beneath his swim shirt. The docking bay doors stood partially open, revealing a sliver of the Morning Star's gangplank. 4 more guards patrolled the area. Hicks didn't bother with cover this time. He fired from the hip, dropping 2 before they could react. Kenji's pistol jumped in his hands as he took down a 3rd. The 4th guard managed to squeeze off a wild shot that ricocheted off the metal doorframe before Hicks silenced him. Alarms began wailing. Red lights strobed across the dock. Go! Hicks shoved Kenji toward the gangplank. I'll hold them here. Kenji didn't argue. He ran, the metal ramp vibrating beneath his feet as the ship's engines rumbled to life. The cargo hold yawned before him, a cavern of shadows and blinking monitor lights. The incubators were closer now, their glass tops fogged with breath. Inside, children slept or stared blankly at the ceiling, their limbs thin, their eyes too old for their faces. A door hissed open at the far end of the room. The doctor from the footage entered, flanked by 2 armed orderlies. His eyes widened at the sight of Kenji. Subject 17, he breathed. Then louder, to the orderlies, don't damage him. The progenitor samples are irreplaceable. Kenji's pistol rose on instinct. The first shot took the left orderly in the throat. The second went wide as the remaining orderly tackled him. They crashed into an incubator, the glass cracking under the impact. Tiny alarms shrilled as the child inside, a girl no older than 6, stirred weakly. The orderly's fist connected with Kenji's jaw. Stars exploded across his vision. He barely managed to block the next blow, driving his knee up into the man's stomach. They grappled across the floor, knocking over equipment, sending syringes skittering. Kenji's fingers found a fallen scalpel. He drove it home. The doctor was backing toward an emergency exit, fumbling with a keycard of his own. Kenji staggered to his feet, pistol raised. "Wait," the doctor pleaded. "You don't understand what we've achieved. Your father." Kenji fired. The doctor crumpled, his keycard skidding across the floor. Kenji scooped it up, then turned to the nearest incubator. The controls were simple: a touchpad, a release lever. The glass lid hissed open. The little girl inside blinked up at him, her pupils dilated, her arms mottled with needle marks. When Kenji reached for her, she flinched. "It's okay," he whispered, though nothing would ever be okay again. "I'm getting you out." Somewhere above deck, heavy footsteps pounded. More guards. The ship's engines deepened in pitch. They were preparing to cast off. And outside, the sporadic gunfire had stopped. Hicks was either dead or overrun. Kenji lifted the girl from the incubator, her body frighteningly light in his arms. Around them, the other children began to stir, their weak cries rising like ghosts. There were too many. He couldn't carry them all. The radio on his belt crackled. A new voice, one that sent ice through his veins. "Kenji." His father's voice, strained but alive. "Listen carefully. There's a lifeboat on the starboard side. Take it. Now." Kenji stared at the radio. How? Where was he? The questions died unasked as the cargo hold doors shuddered under sudden impact. They were coming. The little girl in his arms whimpered. Kenji made his choice. He ran. Kenji's arms burned as he clutched the little girl tighter, her frail body shivering against his chest. The lifeboat swayed violently as it hit the water, the roar of the Morning Star's engines fading into the night. Behind them, the ship was a monstrous silhouette against the flashing lights of the harbor, sirens wailing, voices shouting over megaphones. The authorities had finally arrived. The girl stirred, her small fingers curling into his torn shirt. "Are they gone?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Kenji couldn't bring himself to lie. Not all of them. Hicks was still on that ship. His father, wherever he was, had risked everything to get that message through. And the other children. Kenji's grip tightened. He had failed them. But the girl in his arms was alive. 3 days later, the headlines screamed. Biotech giant collapses after whistleblower leaks human experiment files. Kenji sat in a sterile hospital room, watching the news replay his father's arrest. The man looked hollow, his tailored suit wrinkled, his hands cuffed behind him. But his eyes, those were the same as when Kenji was a boy. Cold. Calculating. A knock at the door. Lena stood there, her arm in a sling, her face bruised but alive. "You did it," she said quietly. Kenji shook his head. "Not enough." She stepped inside, dropping a file on his lap. "Then keep fighting. The courts will need witnesses." Inside were photos. The children who had been recovered. Some reunited with families. Others, like the girl he'd saved, Mira, with no one left. The trial lasted months. Kenji testified. So did Mira, her small voice steady as she described the needles, the tests, the men in white coats who never used names, only numbers. His father never looked at him. Not once. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Kenji didn't feel triumph. Just exhaustion. And a strange, quiet relief. Outside the courthouse, Mira tugged his sleeve. "Will they ever stop being scared?" she asked, watching the other children cling to their parents. Kenji knelt, meeting her eyes. "No," he admitted. "But they'll learn to be brave anyway." A year later, Kenji stood on the steps of a small, brightly painted house, the first of many he'd helped fund for children like Mira. She stood beside him now, her hair in 2 messy braids, her smile wide and real. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, bouncing on her toes. "They're waiting." Inside, laughter echoed. New faces. New stories. Not all of them whole, but all of them free. Kenji took a deep breath and stepped forward. Moral of the story. The greatest justice isn't just punishing the wicked. It's ensuring the broken still get to heal.